We'll talk right now and discuss. Rostislav Murzagulov, writer, publicist, public figure. Rostislav, hello. The central bank and Elvira Nabiullina are already drinking every possible sedative that the Russian Federation has. Decides to double sales of yuan from reserves, to keep the ruble from collapsing. Economists, including Russian ones, believe that the ruble's dependence on export volumes will not help. It is like being dead in the park. The actions of Elvira Nabiullina and the central bank are useless. Meanwhile, friendly countries, including Turkey, Egypt, and Iran, have started canceling vegetable and fruit shipments to Russia because of the falling ruble. The ruble continues to fall, and its rate on the markets for the day reached almost 110 rubles per dollar and 114 rubles per euro. Rostislav, in your estimation, could the collapse of the ruble lead to the fall of Putin's power, or at least to a loss of faith in its might and strength that he has been trying to demonstrate? Is this already the moment when the refrigerator will start beating the TV, or is it still early? The fact is that Putin actually doomed the country to such economic consequences back in February 2022. Because, of course, it was clear to reasonable people that he would not take Kiev in 3 days, that Ukraine would not surrender, and that the Western world would not leave it alone against this madman. In general, this is what happened. Another thing is that Russia held out a little longer than it could have, thanks to the fact that the sanctions were imposed rather sluggishly and cynically. When it was profitable, they were not noticed, such as when tankers were very actively traveling to India under the flags of countries such as Gabon or Belize, when in fact it was Russian oil refined in India and then shipped to the United States, where it was bought by the Americans. And, as the joke goes, who gave Putin the money for the war? Yes, in fact, America did, for many years. But when the next round of sanctions came, including those against Putin's shadow fleet, I said then that the ruble could fall to 120, and lo and behold, it was like seeing water. Although I am not an economist, it was clear even without special knowledge. When the political resolve finally showed up and hit Putin, the ruble, as I predicted, began to fall, because it is in fact no longer supported by anything but Putin's peanuts and sluggish oil trade. Those plans came true, and unfortunately Nabiullina held the situation a little longer than it would have collapsed, because if she had been replaced by other economists who were more loyal, the process could have started much earlier. Elvira Sahibzadna, an intelligent person, originally from Ufa, like me from Bashkortostan, has been left behind to work, and it is very sad. She serves this scoundrel, although she has always been considered a good and intelligent person. And her talents, too, unfortunately, held the situation back a bit. But now I want to add a few perhaps minor details. She had 2 deputies, her closest friends, leave. One of them, Yudayeva, has left to work at the IMF, and the other, I'm sorry, I forgot her last name, but it's easy to Google, has also left, but not to some new place. This is a signal that they realize that there will be a catastrophe. Everything is about to go down, and they don't want to be responsible for hyperinflation and the collapse of entire sectors of the Russian economy. And the Russian economy. Has already started to fall by sector. For example, construction. Today in Russia, mortgages are completely up, which means that the entire construction sector has frozen, and this is the end. Today, even Putin's economic media recognize this. I watch the news with a sense of deep satisfaction. Like in the Soviet Union. RBC was watching, so there were predictions that that was it. The construction industry was bye-bye, and that today prices for new buildings in Russia were falling, would fall by half, that is, by times. It was said verbatim. You can imagine what it is for the construction industry, a drop in times. That is, of course, there is a margin in construction, there are no questions, but it is not 200, not 300%, it is not heroin, but apartments. So actually, when there is such a dramatic fall, it means that that's it, now it's just going to start standing. What is the construction industry? The construction industry is a key driver of the economy in most countries, except maybe the Arab Emirates. We have all been waiting for the collapse we have been talking about, but only Putin has not realized it. The evening is drawing near, and we will soon see the real picture. You seem to be reading my mind, Rostislav. I wanted to continue that. I don't know what state the Russian dictator is in now, but as always, when problems arise, he does what he does best. He hides. This time his bottom is Kazakhstan. I don't know if Kazakhstan will breach it, but he tried his best to do so until it did. Apparently, Putin went there to hide. He just hasn't been told yet that everything's really going to hell. His money is going to his wife, by the way. Putin's lackeys are very afraid to tell him bad news. You know, when there were all these situations with successful counteroffensives of Ukrainian troops, they almost threw a coin, because everyone realized that a man aging in power is a monster. This is not a person. This is a disgusting, horrible person. Because power, as you know, corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This absolutely depraved man will not admit he is wrong. When someone comes to him now and tells him that, "Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, our economy has collapsed," to put it mildly, what do you think he will say? Do you think he will say, "Oh, what an idiot I am for starting a war with the nearest country. Why did I ruin relations with the world, turn Russia into a pariah country, and bring all these sanctions on myself? Ah, what an idiot I am," and give himself a slap on the wrist with the palm of his hand? No, he will say that Nabiullina will change, put some lackey in her place who will be instantly slipped to him by other people who really need this post. Because to her, you have to give her credit. She kept the financial market very strong, and in particular prevented bankers from stealing. And among Putin's lackeys, half of them are thieving bankers, you know? They've been doing it all their lives. Now they are likely to put some young man with a burning eye in a key position. He will try to save the financial system, but at the same time, he will immediately give preferential treatment to banks close to the government, which will only exacerbate the financial crisis and increase the outflow of capital. Everything else will be in a fever, and there will be no money from where to get it. The main thing is Trump's plans, which he will start implementing as soon as he gets there. The market is ready, and Trump has promised his electorate to negotiate with the Arabs to lower oil prices, which he will definitely do. In America, it's impossible not to keep promises to the electorate. Even if you're Trump, you get punished quickly for it. Accordingly, plus, it will not be enough to dramatically reduce the revenues of Putin's oil industry. But at the same time, he said that he would bring production back to America, rein in China, and raise duties on China. And that, of course, is Trumponomics, what some experts call it. It's pretty funny stuff, but no good outcome for America, really. While America is setting up production, there will be a crisis in the country. China produces goods quickly, cheaply, and with quality, while the U.S. has a long history of producing only ideas. Trump, being old, doesn't realize that ideas sell better than the socks and underpants China produces for the American market. Actually, he will do it for sure, because he also promised to his, then, resident of Bashkortostan, that's the name of that country in the middle of America, who is voting for Trump. Here is this: Bashkortostan will demand that China be reined in, and that will likely trigger an economic crisis. When you have a crisis, stagnation, oil prices do what? They keep falling, and if they fall to $40, $50 a barrel, it will eat up all the profitability of the Russian oil industry. Russian oil oligarchs, starting with Sechin, have plundered the industry so that the cost of oil in Russia is twice what it should be. The Soviet Union collapsed at $20 a barrel, not because of the war in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, dictators are forgiven for such things. Russia will collapse at a price of $40 per barrel because the cost of oil production is $40 to $50. This means that even with oil sales, there will not be enough money for war and other needs. The question of time is which of the oligarchs will be the first to realize this. If they don't do it, everyone will sit in The Hague in a row and actually point fingers at each other. No, it's not me, it's him. Rostislav, I believe they have organized a whole flash mob of victory, with tough nuts wearing t-shirts. And Russian telegraph channels say that just after Russia's use of the hazelnut system, escalating conflict with the West, as they call it, although the West, of course, did not start a war against Putin, but Putin has a different opinion. The FSB has received a signal that an assassination attempt on Putin is being prepared. Most likely he wants to be killed by certain members of the Russian elites who are afraid of nuclear war, or just a big conflict with NATO. The main threat to Putin's life obviously comes from such internal enemies. Who could it be that Putin is afraid of? Why hasn't he convinced in so many years of his war, the 11th year, of only fighting against us, that it is so vital to fight NATO, which has never attacked, really, anyone? Who has he not convinced of those around him that this life is necessary? Because unfortunately, there are some not stupid people out there. I know many of them. And what is even coming out now, look at Deripaska's statements. These statements are just that. Look at the nearest state. You realize that the whole reason is him. And you realize that as soon as you wring his neck, everything will improve dramatically. But it is clear that you will have to pay for everything that Putin has done, even if Putin is dead. But one way or another, it has to end urgently, because otherwise, Russia will be in a hole for decades. And then all these great achievements of all these Deripaskas who spent their whole lives walking over the smoking bodies of their partners to their heights, it was all very important for them, you know? Платить за все сделанное Путиным придется, даже если Путин будет мертв, но так или иначе все равно заканчивать это надо срочно, потому что иначе Россия попадет в яму на десятилетия, и значит тогда все эти великие достижения всех этих дерипасок, которые, значит, всю жизнь шли по дымящимся телам компаньонов к этим вот высотам своим, это все, значит, было зря. Because this man, from Putin's upper circle, he can no longer fly a normal airplane. He can't sail on a yacht less than 100 meters long. You know? Well, it's indecent, it's horrible, it's depressing. He can't eat properly if he lives like that. Or if there is even a threat of such a situation, then it is a terrible situation when you have to sail on a 99-meter yacht. Could this man kill another man? Of course, given his past and how he got to the top. In Russia, half the government has been privatized by oligarchs, and information on movements is always available to thousands of people. Putin is vulnerable to his inner circle, whom he tells a lot of things to, and who control him. Putin is vulnerable because of excessive bureaucracy and a plethora of darlings in every department, including the 3,000 people in his administration. Can you imagine 3,000 people, hundreds of them possessing such secrets that could escort Putin somewhere in the next world quite easily? As usual, such a dictator. So something like a man-portable air defense system hit the plane, and then they said that a flock of ducks flew into the plane. And it was unfortunate. It was nobody's fault. Well, the chief died. We're sorry. Everyone will immediately run to the West, led by the Prime Minister, to make peace without waiting for the new president to be sworn in. This situation is quite obvious, and I can see it even without my glasses. We are talking about the collective Putin and his entourage. So the elimination of this biggest #1 terrorist entity in the world would really change things very dramatically with regard to the Russia-Ukraine war or not. Of course, everything rests on Putin personally. Because yes, of course, there were people who brought him shells, brought him ideas. The same great genius, Vladislav Yurievich Surkov. I used to know him and was even in contact with him for a while, until I realized that he is not a progressive, not a liberal, but just a weather vane, someone who follows the direction that is set today, which is necessary to survive and continue driving around Moscow in a BMW 7 and sniffing various substances from the mirror, which I think is provided in the modern cars of oligarchs. So all these people, they wouldn't have organized it themselves. They would probably do some crap. They would steal a lot. But, the thing is, to turn from a thief into a murderer, as someone once said about Putin's government, you have to have an absolutely inconceivable amount of money. And not everyone has this inconceivable amount. Who among these oligarchs has it? Any oligarch out there, dig in, and Russia has been economically unstable for years because of Putin's antics. So every one of these oligarchs is chafing at the thought of not becoming a beggar. Look at Friedman's lamentations about how he can't hire a driver in London and does his own laundry because everyone is not immune from jail and prison. I don't see a situation where oligarchs without Putin will decide to continue the war instead of making money and seeking forgiveness from the West. That said, I am not excusing these people, Surkov, Mishustin, Friedman, and others who obeyed and hoodwinked. They are all guilty and should be held accountable. I'm sure they will immediately start reeling back and haggling for forgiveness so they don't go to jail and have their money taken away. This is a good prospect for the world, because it's hard to pull off such a big thing on the battlefield, because there are still some of these stocks from Soviet times. Mikhail Podolyak talked about it, and I agree with him, because if they had not kept quiet about the production of supernova weapons, they would have told and shown cartoons long ago. And accordingly, All of this will lead to all of these Putin's great, awful ones shaking and trembling. That's the perspective. Today on the battlefield, it is important to be more cunning, to reach out to those circles that have approaches there, to talk to some Russians who can convince numerous other Russians of something. Yes, it is important today. We need to do serious work inside Russia, including ideological work. Probably not for open conversations, but for some other cases. Rostislav, so does Putin have a plan B if everything is collapsing in and around him, or does he just know to fly to Kazakhstan? Since no one really brings bad news, Putin never has long-term plans. As my friend and colleague Stas Dilkovsky aptly noted, Putin is a tactician. He has no strategy because he is unable to calculate several steps ahead. Putin is a C student. I'm adding this on my own behalf. A man who did not study well, who did not get a higher education, because his entire law school, where he had already been bought by the KGB, was just a sinecure for his work. For snitching on other students and other heroic Secret Service activities. This man is incapable. What the hell is Plan B? Look at his Plan A when he announced that he would start bombing Ukraine. My eyes went wide, and I thought, what will he achieve by this? How do you achieve denazification with bombs? How can you demilitarize a country if you attack it and the whole world stands behind it and promises help? Where's the logic in that? Don't overestimate Putin. He's stupid and a bit dodgy, especially in front of his own people, whom he first drives into a concentration camp and then punishes for the slightest objection. Slowly, everyone swallowed one thing after another, and now they are in this servile state before him. This is the only place where his cunning still works. And the rest of the world, look how the rest of the world reacted to his nuts. The whole world, seriously, was frightened only by the ruble, and the rest, the whole world, shrugged its shoulders and said, What Hazel? What did he decide to scare us with? What attack on the UK and the US? It's all absolute nonsense. It's excluded. It's impossible. He's going to lose to the Western world. And you go ahead and tell me exactly whether there will be a nuclear attack or not, whether I should change the tires on my car or not, whether I should do the tushka. That's what I saw everyone. And that's the moment when truckers are yelling about nukes. I had my whole Instagram full of pictures from my friends of how Moscow is trashed. I took one of these pictures that I now have behind me from one of my Ukrainian friends who posted this. Even though Putin is trying to intimidate you, it's time to realize that Ukraine is not going to be scared.
У меня весь Инстаграм в картинках от друзей, как, Москва раздолбана. Я где взял одну из этих своих фотографий, которые сейчас у меня за спиной. Это вот как раз одного из украинских друзей, которые это постили, несмотря на то, что Путин там вас пытается запугивать. Да уже давно пора понять, не испугается Украина.
The Ukrainians had won, the Russians were tired. We laughed at the Hazel, at its configurations and modifications, but not at the new missile, but at the new mockery that was going around on social networks. In Bashkortostan, Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat security guards tried to shoot down an An-2, mistaking it for a Ukrainian drone. Panic and consternation speak for the mood in Bashkortostan and other regions of Russia. I remembered flying a small airplane in the same place. Small aviation is developed there. Enthusiasts teach flying for pennies. I think it was an ordinary flight, not a drone, although there are conspiracies that Budanov allegedly launched it over Salavat.
хорошо развита вот эта малая авиация, там есть такие энтузиасты, которые где-то накупили какую-то рухляди и вот учат людей летать там за какие-то копейки, там, знаете, ну, доступно абсолютно любому, кто там зарабатывает небольшие деньги. Значит, я думаю, что это был какой-то такой полет, я думаю, что это не было никаким дроном, там до сих пор конспирологии, что это якобы все-таки Буданов там запулил по Салават нефтеоргсинтезу, есть там такое огромное предприятие нефтехимическое, но думаю, что это вот, скорее всего, кто-то там, так же, как я, куда-то летел, да?
There is a petrochemical plant, but it was probably a routine flight. You have to be careful now, because Russia still doesn't realize the war. How do you comment on that? Cynically speaking, they could not even shoot down an AN-2, although they are guarding a key petrochemical plant. It is gigantic, with underground reservoirs created by underground nuclear explosions. If the guards are so weak, it means that they simply stole money for air defense and did not put anything in place. Kirill Alexeyevich, if you hear this, God help us, our special services, yes, and realize your words, I think, heard. Rostislav, by the way, it is noteworthy that today there was an attack on Crimea. We, too, are already pining for Crimea, temporarily occupied by the Russian dictator. They were there screaming that everything was flying, Storm Shadow was flying, Neptune was flying, drones were flying. But the problem is different. When ATAC MS and Storm Shadow flew, it was a decision to hit the territory of the Russian Federation. Putin, who illegally wrote Crimea and 4 of our regions into his constitution, which really hasn't rubbed off, except I don't know in what places, didn't say anything.
Спасибо вам, кстати, за эту позицию и за эту деятельность. Была атака, кстати говоря, на Крым, мы тоже уже заскучали, временно оккупированный российским диктатором. Они там кричали, что летит все, и Storm Shadow летит, Нептуны летят, С-200 летит, дроны летят. Но примечательно другое, что когда летели атакамсы и Storm Shadow еще то раз решили...
And now, as they fly around the Kursk and Bryansk regions, he is somehow nervous. Does he realize that these territories have never been his and never will be? I think there is an understanding in his entourage. Putin may think of these regions as his own, but no one in the world, not even his allies, recognizes Crimea or the other 4 territories as Russian. So, of course they are doing their best, but they still take into account the tradition of international diplomacy, because, from the point of view of international diplomacy, this is absolutely not Russia, and they realize that. Rostislav, another point that points to possible preparations. The State Duma has approved the law on secret government work during martial law. Will Putin really go for martial law? It's not like he's waging a full-fledged war, although there has long been a war on his territory, in fact. But what are they taking? You know, he may try to do it at some point, but all these Sybarites, all these lovers of sweet wines and non-capricious women, people and men, too, who are sitting in these white houses of his, will never work under martial law. They are not patriots and are not ready to die for Putin. They would rather quietly turn his head off and send it to Kiev in a parcel with a note. Sorry, Vladimir Alexandrovich. Rostislav, thank you so much for this conversation, for the facts and humor. Thank you for your position and your time. See you again. Have a nice day. Humor should definitely be kept. Happily, that's what we're doing. Bye. See you later. Rostislav Murzagulov, writer, publicist, and social activist. Friends, thank you for your time, for listening. Leave your comments, subscribe to Channel 24's YouTube channel. Take care. We believe in the armed forces of Ukraine. See you. We will win.